Revealed Rachel Reeves has finally delivered her budget, and it arrived with leaks, U-turns and more than a little controversy. The immediate reaction to the budget is that Labour MPs are celebrating the end of the two-child benefit cap. The markets are steady, but some voters have been left feeling that manifesto pledges have been broken. Political commentators like Sky News' Beth Rigby have summarised the budget saying, "A budget of self-preservation that blows pledges made to the public while pleasing the party. The same old Labour. Why the leadership's credibility might not be recoverable." Sky News reported the following. Over and over again in the run-up to the election and beyond, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor told voters they would not put up taxes on working people, that their manifesto plans for government were fully costed and, with the tax burden at a 70-year high, they were not in the business of raising more taxes. On Wednesday, the Chancellor broke those pledges as she lifted taxes by another £26 billion, adding to the £40 billion rise in her first budget. She told working people a year ago she would not extend freezing tax thresholds, a Conservative policy, because it would hurt working people. So let's take a look at some of the hidden problems in this budget. When you strip it all back, this budget is really about three things: the government spending more, taxing more, and borrowing more. Taxes are set to rise by 38.2% of GDP, the highest level since World War II. In addition to this, government spending will reach 44% of the economy, putting the UK near the top internationally. GB News reported the following. The Institute of Fiscal Studies has delivered a direct challenge to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, accusing her of avoiding the substantial tax reforms the organisation says are needed to support Britain's economic growth. Helen Miller, the think tank's director, issued a detailed critique of the Chancellor's strategy, arguing that despite the government's stated focus on expansion, the latest budget showed limited ambition for the kind of change the IFS believes is required. The respected economic research body said there was a clear gap between ministerial rhetoric about prioritising growth and the practical measures unveiled, suggesting the Chancellor had again chosen caution over wide-ranging reform. This intervention came as the Office for Budget Responsibility released updated forecasts showing a weaker economic outlook for Britain over the second half of the decade. Now, when it comes to the increase of budget spending, a huge chunk of this is welfare. That will go up from £314 billion this year to £406 billion in 2030-31. The biggest part of that increase comes from the state pension, which will rise from £138 billion to £180 billion. But that's only the beginning. Pension costs are expected to reach 8% of the whole economy in future. On top of that, health spending will take up more, and defence is meant to rise from 2.5 to 5% of GDP by 2035. In short, the state is going to get a lot bigger. Older people keep strong protections like the triple lock on pensions, but younger people face higher taxes on pensions, savings, and frozen income tax thresholds. The basic rate of income tax hasn't gone up, but personal tax allowances are being frozen for 3 years. In practice, that brings in roughly the same amount of money as an actual tax rise. It raises the awkward question, when is a tax rise not a tax rise? Because prices are higher, people earn more in cash terms, and that pulls more of them into paying tax or into higher tax bands. That's good news for the Treasury and helps the OBR's forecasts look rosier, but it means more people paying more tax. There has been much discussion around Labour and whether or not they have broken their manifesto. And when asked about this, the Prime Minister said, "We kept to our manifesto in terms of what we've promised, but I accept the challenge that we've asked everybody to contribute. I want to be really clear on why we've done that. That is because we need to protect our NHS, to make sure we've got the money to put into our schools and bear down on the cost of living." But pushed again that making working people pay more, as the Chancellor has admitted, undermines accountability in the government. Starmer says, "We've done the least possible we can. We've done it in a fair way."
Prime Minister, you told working people you wouldn't raise their taxes when you were fighting an election. You said it repeatedly when you were Prime Minister. You've broken their word. You've broken their trust. Will you apologise to them for misleading them?
Well, we kept to our manifesto in terms of what we promised, but I accept the challenge. I accept the challenge that we've asked everybody to contribute.
Looking at the plans as a whole, borrowing goes up for the next 3 years. Then in the final year, there's meant to be a sharp shift. More tax coming in and some vague, not yet specific spending cuts. On paper, that produces a big improvement by 2029-2030. In reality, it just means the good news is being brought forward and the pain is pushed into the future. Chancellors have been doing this kind of thing for years. The bond markets seem fairly relaxed about it for now. The Resolution Foundation has stated that this was a backloaded budget. Half of the government's energy bill package is only in place for 3 years, with £55 set to be added back onto electricity bills in 2029-2030. Some of the more controversial tax rises, including the £4.7 billion cut to salary sacrifice and mansion tax, are coming into effect in 2028-29. Overall, the Chancellor's decisions today increase borrowing by £1 billion on average in the first 3 years of the forecast versus savings of £24 billion on average in the final 2. This, alongside a forecast that deteriorates more at the start than at the end, leaves the public finances getting worse before they get better, with borrowing higher than this March in every year until 2029-2030, and the level of debt higher throughout the forecast. And it leaves the government set to phase out cost of living support, implement significant tax rises, and cut public services ahead of the next election. This budget does have holes in it, not small cracks, but large structural gaps that economists, think tanks, and market analysis have been flagging from the moment Rachel Reeves sat down. And that is why many analysts have described it as a buy now, pay later budget. Take, for instance, the response to Rachel Reeves' 2025 budget from Stephen Fine, the Chief Executive Officer of the investment bank Peel Hunt.
Well, other than the extraordinary scenes when the OBR accidentally leaked or published, I think, if anything, this feels very much like a buy now, pay later budget. And I think, as your presenter just before was explaining, an awful lot of this is backloaded towards the end of the 3-4 year period.
Economists point out that the Chancellor has front-loaded relief and back-loaded tax rises, meaning households get support now, but in 2028, 2029 and 2030, the tax burden sharply tightens. This timing isn't accidental. It places the toughest choices just far enough into the future that they fall outside the political spotlight of today's debate. Borrowing rises for the next 3 years, spending commitments rise even faster, and the major revenue-raising measures, like the mansion tax reforms, the tightening of salary sacrifice, and the continuation of frozen income tax thresholds, only deliver their full impact after several years have passed. It gives the impression of stability now, while quietly banking on a future in which higher taxes, slower growth, and squeezed public services somehow produce a miracle of fiscal repair. The markets liked the fact that Reeves was increasing the size of her rainy day fund to $22 billion by the end of the decade, but were much less keen on the live now, pay later shape of the budget. Spending is increasing in the short term, but the higher taxes will only start to kick in as of the date of the next election approaches, when the government will be looking to keep voters sweet. The markets are already starting to wonder how serious the commitment to financial rectitude really is. Neil Wilson, an analyst at Saxo Markets, summed up the City scepticism when he commented, "Big spending increases front-loaded, massive tax increases and restraint has been backloaded. The classic policy mix, jam today, pain tomorrow. I hardly think it seems credible." And this is exactly why so many analysts say the budget simply isn't credible. When you strip away the political language, the cheering and the headlines, what you're left with is a plan that only works if everything goes perfectly, and that almost never happens in the real world. The problem is simple. Reeves is spending a lot now, but the big tax rises that pay for it don't arrive until years later. This creates a huge gap between what the government is promising today and what it must deliver tomorrow. For a budget to be credible, 2 things need to be true. The government must clearly show where the money will come from. The timing of that money must be realistic and achievable. This budget struggles on both points. The major revenue-raising measures, like the new property surcharge, the tightening of salary sacrifice, and the freezing of income tax thresholds, only raise serious money in 2028, 2029 and 2030. But the spending increases, especially on welfare and pensions, begin immediately. That means the government is effectively borrowing now and hoping the revenue turns up later. And that is where confidence breaks down. The OBR has already warned that economic growth over the next few years will be weak. If growth slows, tax revenues fall, borrowing rises, and the entire plan becomes harder to deliver. There is also a political problem. The biggest tax rises are scheduled to hit right before the next election. Historically, chancellors do not choose election years to deliver painful tax increases. They delay them, they water them down, or they scrap them entirely. People are already asking, will Labour really push through unpopular tax rises in 2028 and 2029 when they're trying to stay in power? During the lead up to the 2024 election, the Labour Party, including Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, repeatedly promised that they would not raise taxes on working people.
Labour will not be increasing taxes on working people. I am very clear about that. And everything in our manifesto will be fully costed and fully funded.
They also insisted that their plans were fully costed and would require no extra tax hikes. Yet, once in government, Labour raised taxes by $40 billion in 2024 and then raised taxes again by another $26 billion this year. This is why Keir Starmer keeps being questioned about these broken promises. Take a look at this clip.
We've been able to take £150 off that on average for every family.
You told people in the run-up to the election, we will not raise your taxes, people are taxed too high. 800,000 people are being dragged into taxes from your measures yesterday. 1 million people are being dragged into higher tax bands. You have misled the public.
We have absolutely done the least possible we can. We've done it in a fair way. We have had headwinds this year, which were unpicked. The OBR looked at productivity. Again, they reviewed the 15 years of productivity, and then, based on the failure of the last government, then downgraded forecast as we go forward. But we are clear. We are clear that we are asking everybody. We are asking people to all make a contribution to this. We've kept it to the minimum, but we're really clear what's that's for. It's for the NHS, which people care passionately about. Talk to anybody in this room. It's about what we need to spend on our schools, about children, and it's about keeping the cost of living down.
That you've misled the public. You clearly don't agree with anything I'm saying.
I think anybody would acknowledge that.
And this is where it becomes important to remember what we said earlier. During the lead up to the 2024 election, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves repeatedly promised that they would not rise taxes on working people, insisting their plans were fully costed and required no extra tax hikes. But the moment they entered government, the reality changed. Labour raised taxes by $40 billion in 2024 and then raised taxes again by another $26 billion this year. This is why Keir Starmer continues to face relentless questions about these broken pledges. That is why analysts describe this as a jam today, pain tomorrow. The good news happens now, the difficult decisions happen later. Conveniently out of the spotlight. The truth is that the budget only works if everything goes right. Strong growth, rising tax receipts, and a government willing to impose big tax increases at the worst possible time politically. And experience tells us that is extremely unlikely. That's why analysts say this budget doesn't add up in the real world, and why many believe the Chancellor's plan lacks long-term credibility. One bright spot in the budget, if you want to call it that, is that the government's fiscal headroom, basically its wiggle room, has grown from $9 billion to around $21.7 billion. The Chancellor is hoping this extra breathing space will calm the constant rumours about what taxes might have to rise next, rumours that did real damage to confidence and the economy this year. But even with higher taxes coming in, this cushion is not exactly rock solid. One unexpected global shock, one bad year of growth, and that $21 billion gap can disappear almost overnight. And this is the real issue. The budget, like so many before it, is designed around short-term politics rather than long-term thinking. There's very little appetite for bold changes or taking risks that could actually shift the UK's direction. To be fair, the Chancellor wasn't working with an easy set of circumstances, but when the solution is basically do what we've always done, but with slightly more spending and slightly more tax, you can't expect a dramatic turnaround. In the short term, the economy will probably limp along well enough. Maybe we'll even get lucky, a burst of productivity growth, a wave of innovation, something that gives the UK a lift. That's not impossible. But it's also not something you can rely on. The UK does have underlying strengths, but whether this budget actually helps unlock them, to put it mildly, highly questionable. And this is where the criticism becomes sharper, because this simply wasn't a budget focused on growth. There were no major pro-investment reforms, no real push to boost business confidence, and no structural changes capable of lifting productivity over the long term. Economists have pointed out that without genuine growth policies, higher taxes and bigger government alone can only take the UK so far. You can redistribute wealth, but you can't expand the economic pie without bold reforms, and those were noticeably absent here. In the end, this budget raises serious concerns. Analysts are right to call it a buy now, pay later plan because so much of the relief comes immediately, while the real pain, the heavy tax rises and spending cuts, is pushed years into the future. At the same time, it is not a budget that will kickstart growth. There are no bold reforms and nothing that fundamentally shifts the UK's long-term economic direction. It offers short-term comfort, but leaves long-term questions unanswered, and that is why so many doubt its credibility.